Let's restart. Welcome everyone to Learning Strategies. The topic is motivation and how to get a propulsion system going. And we're talking with Kate Benson, the International Director for Education of the Society of Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Welcome, Kate.
Hello, thank you for having me.
How do you motivate people? Or maybe I should ask first, what is motivation?
Oh, we always have to do the philosophical question first.
We can do how to motivate them then, and then I'll ask them, but what is it?
Well, I don't know. Come on, let's have your definition of motivation. Let's do it the other way around. What's your definition of motivation, Jos?
Well,
and I'll tell you if I agree with you.
Yes. So my definition of motivation is basically the reward seeking of the brain. The brain likes material and social rewards, and it will, whatever is found rewarding by the brain, that is what will get the person to do stuff, to behave in a certain way. And that's what people call motivation, but they tend to treat motivation as some kind of magic box inside the brain where you can put things in, but that is just not the case.
Yeah, it's another nominalization motivation. So people will say things like, oh, I'm just not motivated, or I can't motivate him, or he hasn't got any motivation, or he has loads of motivation, like it's in a bucket.
Exactly.
Just like self-esteem. It's like, have I got a bucket of motivation that I can throw over myself or throw over somebody else? And no, it doesn't exist as some separate entity from who the human being is. It's about having certain criteria in place so that the person can generate the feelings of wanting to do something and being motivated to do something, or being propelled to do something.
Right.
So for me, it's very much about, it's again about our thought processes, but it's also very much about our feelings. And how do we get to the feelings of wanting to do something more? And I've got a slide for my bit.
Yes.
My practical bit. See, not my philosophical bit, but so my if I'm thinking about motivation, especially in terms of learning. Thank you, Jos. What we have to think about is that if you look at it from a negative point of view, if somebody doesn't believe that they can do something, they won't be motivated to do it. We've talked about this before in terms of the fear of failure.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of young people will say, for example, that, oh, that's stupid. This is stupid. I don't want to do this. It's stupid. Or it's dumb, or whatever. Now, the reason that they say that is because the only alternative to it being stupid is to go, I'm stupid, I can't do it. Right. So often, especially young people, especially teenagers, they'll project out onto the thing you want them to do, or the thing they're being asked to do, that it's just not worth it. It's futile, it's stupid. So they have to believe, firstly, that they can do it. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. So I've talked about this before in terms of zones of proximity. I think, have we talked about that before?
Does ring a bell?
I think we have. So basically, a zone of proximity is what you already know and can do.
Right.
And then there's a circle outside of that, or a globe outside of that. And this is because of what you know you can do, you can potentially imagine or conceive of doing this much.
Right.
But if it's outside of that zone of proximity, it's out here somewhere, then actually it's too far away from what I already know. So it's going to be too hard. It's going to be too difficult. So, for example, if I can ride a bike, I can imagine riding a motorbike. Maybe, but I'm not sure I'm up for flying, a spaceship yet, right? But then if I'd learned to ride a motorbike, then I can maybe ride a car, and then that takes me to a plane, and then maybe I can go to a spaceship. But the jump from the bicycle to the spaceship's too big. So that's about belief that you can. So the thing you're asking somebody to do has to be, they have to have the belief that they can do it. Right. Now, this is where a lot of NLPers make a big mistake, because we go around, us NLPers, saying, you know, the sky's the limit. You can do anything as long as you believe it. You know, all we have to do is like think positively about it. And there's no step between here and there.
In fact, there's no step in anything, because I always ask them if they say something like that. Oh, that's great. Can you bring me a rock from the planet of Mars within the next hour?
Yeah. That's a great one. That's a great example, you see. So, you know, we have to be not realistic with our beliefs, because I hear people also saying things like, well, you've just got to be realistic about what you can achieve. It's good to know that you can get anywhere you want to be, but you also need to have the strategies that get you there. You have to have the behaviors that get you there. Yeah. So a belief that you can do it. So how you build a belief.
But one moment. Sorry? So I always make the difference between, it's very important to have a very big dream for the long term, and at the same time have a very good strategy in the short term that actually moves you towards that big dream.
Yeah, that's right. You know, that's right. You know, all roads start with a single step, you know, and you need to have some sort of visualization or imagination or whatever that you can hold your dream big, but take the action that gets you there. But ultimately, you know, this is before we even get to the action bit. We're just talking about getting the motivation together here. So somebody has to believe it's possible. They can do it. So if we're trying to motivate something, we have to try in this terms of zones of proximity to look at something that they can do and connect it with what it is that we're wanting them to do, so that they can believe that that is a natural and easy and fun, possibly, step to do.
Right.
So we look at ways of doing that.
What I do with my clients, if they say that I ask them to do something and they say, oh, it all fails, I can't do anything right. And I say, yeah, but you learned Dutch. You can speak Dutch. Yeah. I understand you perfectly. And you actually...
The best example I ever heard for this one, which is irrefutable, when you've got somebody who can actually negate everything that you say you won the most important race of your life because your sperm got to the egg first.
Right.
And that is like irrefutable. It's like the moment of conception. So you've already won the most important race because your sperm got to the egg and your egg got the right sperm.
Right.
I think that's a brilliant example. One of my students came up with that one. I thought it was superb.
Yeah. I'm not sure whether I would identify with a single sperm, but I do recognize the biological probability of this story.
Well, I thought it was a brilliant example, and most of the kids go, "Oh, I never thought of that." So they can do. Let's just go through the overview, and then we unpack each of these, and then the next thing is, okay, I can do it, but is it worth doing? Is it something that has some value to me? Can I see how it's going to benefit me in some way?
Exactly.
So that I want to do it because it's desirable. So the outcome, if you like, is desirable. And I'll often say...
This would be the positive consequence of the behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Is there going to be some benefit to me in the long term? Am I going to have those good feelings about it? Is it going to, is my brain going to be rewarded because it's something worth doing? So, there's lots of things that I can do, but I'm not very highly motivated to do necessarily because they're not something that gives me much sort of sense of joy, or satisfaction. So, I can do the filing in my office.
Right.
But it doesn't give me deep joy to do it. No. So I can con myself. And this is how I have to do it, because I do my filing about once every 18 months to 2 years. So when the pile for filing gets to the point where it's not going to stay on the top of the filing cabinet any longer without toppling off, then I've got a negative consequence. Which goes, if I don't do the filing, it's all going to fall off and then it'll be more work.
Exactly.
So that starts to niggle at me, and I start to feel a bit bad about it.
Avoid bad of negative consequences.
Yeah, so I want to avoid. So I haven't got to the positive consequences.
But
So
if I pay you,
I can then tell myself, I can do some positive self-talk to myself and say, look, just imagine how lovely the office will look when it's all the worktops and the filing cabinets, it's all clear and tidy. And I quite like clear and tidy. Right. So I can, I like that sense of it. Not that much, but I like it enough. And so
if I pay you 5,000 euro for every day that you file something, doesn't matter how much you file.
Oh, that would motivate me. Yeah, that would be good. I'm not that money orientated, but if it was to do with a piece of paper going in the filing cabinet, I could raise my
very little work, 5,000 euros. You can do it every single day.
Yeah. I probably could. But actually, see, because I'm not that money orientated. If somebody went, well, Kate, you can have your 5,000 euros today for filing. Or you could go on this really exciting, I don't know, trip ride somewhere that you've never been before and you've never had that experience before. You could go on a rib round the Isle of Wight on a beautiful sunny day. If somebody walked through the door and said, forget the filing, Kate, come with me. There's a rib waiting. I'm sorry, I'd be out the door because I'm not. I'd go, I'll get the 5 grand tomorrow. Exactly. I can live without today's. So money is only one form of motivation. Now, for somebody like you, if I went filing 5,000 euros or a ride on a rib, you'd probably go for the money.
I don't know. If it's, of course, if the 5,000 euro is available every single day, and the special adventure only once, then yeah. Maybe you can make an exception.
The adventure. Yeah, well, like you said, that's exactly what I would do. If the 5 grand was available every day, then I'd give that up for the adventure. So there's all, so it's got to be worth doing in some way. So you have to find something that makes it worth doing. And people often think that money will always will out, but it doesn't always will out. There's a lot of people who give up a lot of stuff, and because they're not
always win, but can become too expensive for the person who wants to motivate you.
Well, okay, but then there's a lot of other things. Probably punishment would always win in the same way, but money isn't any better than anything else. So you have to find out
that it gets people into negative states.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So we don't want to motivate people that way. We want to motivate people, for the most part, we want to motivate people positively. We might use those negative states. When we come to look at propulsion, then we utilize what I call the energy of the negative state to push somebody into the more positive one. So you can use the negative consequences as a propulsion towards the motivation.
Yes.
But we're just looking at the sort of criteria for motivation here. So the next,
when you use it in the propulsion system, you're not actually using the negative consequences and positive consequences, but you're using memories of negative consequences and memories of positive consequences.
Yeah, well, sometimes, depends. Yeah,
you're not literally hitting them.
Let's just stick with one thing. Let's not jump around too much. We'll have that conversation. In one model, you would do that. In another model, you wouldn't necessarily. You would be using imagination and running the movie forward.
Yeah, okay. I don't mind if it's memories or fantasies.
Okay. It wouldn't always necessarily, because you may not have any memories of that. You may not have memories of the negative consequences.
Yes,
but you might have.
My point is that these are still antecedents and not consequences.
Yes.
Because you haven't behaved yet.
Yes. So the other two things in motivation that are helpful to ensure that the action's going to happen is that the thing that the way in which you're being asked to do something is interesting. So it's not, it's not. Remember the other week we were talking about programmed learning, Skinner's programmed learning, and which you break things down into such tiny steps that it just becomes tedious. And even though if you might want the outcome, if it's not interesting enough to keep going and keep repeating the behavior, then people will quit partway through. sometimes even when they really want the outcome.
Yeah.
So, this is very important for teaching, because it's your job
trainers
and training as well. It's your job to keep the material and the delivery interesting and engaging, so that people can carry on wanting the outcome. If you just look at the attrition rate on courses, university courses, school is different because it's compulsory, so kids have no choice as to go, whether or not it's interesting or not. But once you get post 16 and people are, have choices, how many, just think for yourself, people who are listening might have thinking, how many times have you signed up for a program, maybe a series of webinars, and it's been so dull that, you've just forgotten that the next, Friday morning when you're supposed to be doing it, you just think,
make it even worse.
There's something better to do. And what people do there is what I call a cost-benefit analysis. Am I better off spending my time doing this, or am I better off doing something else?
They don't get any positive consequences. But let me tell you about the 100 students that I started with studying philosophy in 1991. So we started in September. By Christmas, half had left. Only 10 got through the first year, and only 3 actually graduated. So the 97% attrition rate.
Right. Well, you could go through the whole list, you see, and you could go, so how many of them didn't believe after the first few weeks that they could do the philosophy?
Maybe it was too hard.
Pardon?
With philosophy, they come in with the idea that there are basically two types of students. One is very much disturbed person and thinks that philosophy is going to give the answers. The reaction to that student by the professors is, what? You think that's a problem? Let me give you a real problem. So those are gone immediately, and others, they think they can do it because they have these great ideas of themselves, and then they come in as a philosopher. They think as a philosopher in scare quotes, and then they say, "Oh, this is my idea." And then the professor says, "Yes, but it sounds like you have not read the medieval monk Quarkos from 13th century from the city of Pias. I should read that first, because what you're saying has already been, denied or explained why it's impossible to come up with these ideas. Go and read that first before you come up with this nonsense." And then they discover that they really can't do it, and then they're gone.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty. One of the interesting things I would be saying about that, in that situation, I would be saying to the philosophy professors, who probably wouldn't give two hoots about that anyway, because the problem with philosophy professors at university is they get paid anyway, whether they have 100 students or whether they have 3. So they have not got any great motivation for making their courses or for answering these questions for their students. So they don't care if they end up with 3. In fact, it benefits them to end up with 3, because the 3 that they end up with are like them. Exactly. And they enjoy working with. So they basically try and get rid of anybody who's a bit of a pain. So they end up with the 2 or 3 young people who they can enjoy working with for their own benefit. That's not a really good strategy for being a good teacher, frankly.
I know. So literally, I was a student assistant for 3 years at the University of Utrecht, working for a professor. He literally said to me, "Joost, 100 students have signed up for my course. My course is not that interesting that 100 persons would want to do this course. You do the teaching for the first 2 weeks. If you scared away half of them, then I will come and teach." That's I'm not lying. That's literally what he said.
Yeah. I could quite believe it, and I mean, it just about confirms what I believe about philosophers, Joost. So I'm not surprised at all. Now, even in other subjects, you see, I did an equally sort of, if you like, dry subject, in that I studied law. You did philosophy, I did law. Now, when I remember really clearly, the first so on the principle that we would only end up with X number of students, they used to recruit 350 students. And the reason they recruited 350 students into the first year of the law degree in Manchester was because that was the number that would fit in the large lecture theatre.
Right.
So we couldn't have any more because it wouldn't fit in. And so they'd fill the seats in the lecture theatre. And then in the first week, they were all sitting there. And there had recently been on, when I went, because I'm very old, when I went, there'd recently been a very popular American series on called, I think it was called The Paper Chase or something like that. But it was about, it was basically about lawyers, and it was all very nice. And so suddenly the interest in law had gone up phenomenally. But I remember sitting there in the lecture theatre, and this very stuffy prof stood up, and he was doing his induction thing. And he said, look to your left and look to your right, and take note as to who is sitting next to you, because one of you will not be here at the end of the year.
Right.
Now, you know, that was fine. But the problem was that was somebody with like me, I just sat there and went, it's me. It's going to be me. Like, because the two people on either side of me were like, well, it's not going to be me, and I'm going into Daddy's law firm, and I was going like, no, I'm not convinced I can do this at all. I don't really know what I'm doing here. They've made a terrible mistake letting me on this course. They must have just like put my application form on the wrong pile, and I'm sitting here, and there's no way I'm going to be able to do this. In fact, I was the one who got the best degree that year. But the two people sitting on side of me weren't there at the end of the first year.
So that's a bad way to motivate people.
It did help me, but not that year. Because at the end of the year, when I went back in the second year, because these two people had gone, I started to believe that maybe I was going to be able to make it. Right. But what was important to me was that I had tutors who, despite the fact that I didn't believe in myself, they held out enough hope for me. They believed in me enough to sort of drag me through until I started to believe that I could do it. So they did that thing that I've talked about before. And they said, I know you don't believe this, Kate. I know you don't believe you can do this, but trust us. We know you can, and we know how to help you to do it, because we've taught loads of people like you. So right. I was able to go, well, okay, then I'll like suspend my negativity and disbelief and just keep going to see if they're right. So sometimes you have to sort of just, provide whatever it is for the person. So, the slash and burn for get out of here if you're no good, you will lose good people.
Yes.
And so that's why and again, in terms of it being worth doing, if I looked around me, I didn't know why, really. I hadn't really got a clear idea about what I was doing on this course or what I would do afterwards. But I knew that the bit of information I had was I didn't have decent grades in sciences to get on a science degree, but I had enough decent arts grades to get on a law degree because they didn't require science.
Yes.
So and law was the best degree at the time, the best degree I could get for a good job without having sciences.
Yes.
So that made it worth doing for me. Now, in terms of being interesting and enjoyable, I have to say, you need, so it's your teacher's job is to make it as interesting and as enjoyable as it can be, because to think about motivation in my book, you will have a different explanation for this, Joost, and you can put it in your ABC model in a moment. So for me, there are two ways that people get through doing something, and we've talked about this before. The first is that somebody really they really want the outcome. They really believe it's worth doing. They desire it, and they are prepared to put up with a significant amount of pain in terms of it being boring or painful and not enjoyable in order to get the result. And then there's another type of motivation where people don't care really that much about the outcome, but they really enjoy the process of the learning. It's interesting and enjoyable enough. So that's another form of motivation. So for really good motivation, we need both of those together. We need and plus the ability to believe that you can do it. So the belief you can do it, that you really want to do it, and that it's the process itself is interesting and enjoyable. And that for me creates motivation. And you will have an ABC explanation of that, I'm sure.
In part, but I'm also a very good example that you're right, because I studied philosophy, and most of the philosophy I did not find interesting at all. But philosophizing, the whole activity, really relaxes me. I later learned that it has to do with my brain type. My brain really likes to talk philosophy about stuff, and then it relaxes. And so I thought the process was very enjoying. For the first 3 years that I studied it, I was absolutely clueless what we were doing, what philosophy was about. I had no idea. I had no idea that I could do it. And then after 3 years, suddenly something worked in my brain. And I was going, I think this is the idea of philosophy. And then I wrote a paper, and it was very well received by the professor. That's why I got the job in the first place. He said, here, you have an 8 on a scale from 1 to 10 and a job. You're going to work for me because you're finally understanding. You're not leaving, I think, because you're already 3 years here. Didn't get to scare you away, but now you finally know what we're doing here. So you get the job.
Oh no, that's great. That's that's a really good example.
And then I really started to enjoy it and thought it was really interesting. So the problem with me is that if you have the whole of philosophy, I find like 99% extremely uninteresting, unenjoyable, and boring. But there's 1% or maybe 10% that I find fantastic, and I just had to find my way over to the fantastic stuff.
The fantastic stuff, absolutely. But you have to have sufficient motivation to keep going to find that.
Yes.
Now, Jane's got an interesting question here. Do you want to read it out, yours?
Yes. What about allowing step back and without control, just doing, and then pieces come together and make the fullness, like we know but don't fully know, enough pull to keep going, delayed reward, etc.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about there, Jane, is a good example of what we might call about problem solving. Sometimes we have a problem and we're looking for a solution, but sometimes we're just feeling our way through something. We're not even really clear what the solution might be. We know there's a problem, so we can sort of go on an exploration where we suspend, like, I don't know where this is leading, but I'm just going to keep going, looking for pieces and see what emerges. And I think that's a useful strategy for some things. It's a bit of that I know nothing strategy. I'll just go and see what's available. But I don't think it's necessarily part of a propulsion or motivation strategy. I think it's a sort of curiosity strategy to get curious about something. And curiosity is very important. But that's also part of making something interesting. If you're not curious about something, you won't even try to start. You have to do that. Well, what if that? You have to have that open, sort of thing about it. Well, what's the outcome here? Which is all part of being interesting. Does that answer your question, Jane?
Hopefully. I can just add that delaying rewards is often good, especially when you reward people or children in the early stages. Whenever they do the desired behavior, you reward them. But at some point, you have to make sure that you are going to dilute the rewards. So you give them, they have to do more to get the same reward, or they get less reward for whatever they were doing. And at one point, you want to completely randomize it so that they have no clue when they get rewarded or not.
Yeah, gambling. That's the gambling strategy. The gambling for reward is highly motivating.
Yes, so that's just how the brain works. Our dopamine reward center is more impressed by rewards that are, either unexpectedly big or unexpected at all. So if the reward, that's why I could not, I could motivate Kate a little bit with promising her 5,000 euros a day. But her brain will very quickly went, but if it's every day, then yeah, sure, I can skip a couple of days. I don't need so like say
I
300.
need that much. No.
Exactly, 300 times 5,000 is 150K. That's nice. So I have the other 65 days I can do other stuff. And so,
Yeah,
but if you would not know when you get 5,000 euros, then it would be different. Then you would go, yeah, I can go on the trip, but maybe this would ruin the one time that I got the 5,000 euros. I'm not going to take any chances. I'm going to file my stuff.
yeah,
So
that's right. That's absolutely right. Yes, I guess.
It's probably not what you were pointing at, but it's just that I think that that is always good to take into account the delayed reward. Of course, if you look at children, then grown-ups think it's very important that children are good at delaying rewards. And they have all these experiments with delayed rewards. But in reality, it's much better if you want to program them to reward them whenever they do what you want them to do, and then dilute the rewards. That is much better.
Yeah, the whole well, the research that Joost is referring to is the emotional intelligence research on delaying gratification as one of the signs of emotional intelligence. That children who just, you know, and actually it's not, I don't think it's about emotional intelligence. I think it's about trust. That
it depends.
A child who, if it's a matter of whether the child believes you. So if you say to a child, I'm putting this bag of sweets on the table, I'm putting a sweet on the table, and I'm going to go out of the room for 10 minutes, and if you don't eat it in the time I'm out of the room, you can have this whole bag.
Yeah.
And so then some children just wait for the person to go out of the room and grab the sweet. And others sit there and they engage in a whole load of behaviors to avoid eating the sweet. They'll put their head on the table. They'll look elsewhere. They'll go and do something else. They'll sing to themselves. They'll engage in a whole load of different behaviors. It's not that they're just sitting there doing nothing. They do something else to avoid picking up the sweet. But they're highly motivated because they believe the adult who's walked out of the room is going to bring them in and give them the bag of sweets. And the child who grabs the sweet goes, I don't believe him. People have lied to me before. I'll just eat what I've got in front of me. Or they think, well, I'll eat the bag of sweets and I'll be able to persuade the adult to give me the bag anyway.
Yeah. But so it also has to do with brain types. So we did not discuss it. So I'm a strong believer in the ABC model that the positive consequences steer our behavior. But it has to be, it is a bit more subtle, because different brain types work quite differently. So if you look at we have a type 8 boss, it has a very impulsive character, has very difficulty with impulse control. They will grab sweets much earlier than type 1 perfectionist, who basically say, well, if I'm not supposed to grab it, I'm not going to. And then, of course, they would say, yeah, it's a good indicator for social or emotional intelligence. It just happens to be that the type 8 bosses do not score high on emotional intelligence. So I often think that these kind of tests are the researchers think that they find something, but I always think that in reality you're just finding little bits of the brain type theory.
Well, I think they are, but I don't think that was the basis. That wasn't the basis premise of the emotional intelligence debate. Actually, it was what Goldman said was that there are 5 or so criteria, of which I won't be able to remember them all probably, but which contribute to emotion. To what he said was that there are certain skills and strategies and behaviors which actually mean that people are more successful than if you just have a high IQ. And what his argument was, we have been saying that IQ is the test of success in society.
Yeah, but that is already false.
And he then said, so he came up with the notion of EQ because he said, actually, these people who do these things are more successful than these people with a high IQ. So he just grouped them together under this label called emotional intelligence. What he says was perfectly reasonable. Of course, what people do when they shorthand other people's work, it can then become, oh, that's an indicator of high EQ. But actually what it is behaviors and beliefs. It's just all back to our NLP stuff. It's what they believe and behave and do, which makes them successful people, which is not about how intelligent you are in an IQ basis.
Yes. No, IQ is complete bullshit. The IQ is that's a typical example of psychologists I say going out to defraud science, because the IQ, that's if you have a very low IQ, if you have an extreme high correlation, that you're not going to make much of your life. The chance of you, if you're I don't know what the political correct way of saying is, but if you're retarded, then then you have a very low IQ, but the chance that you will become a member of parliament, that's different in the UK. The chance that you become a banker is very low. So there's extreme high correlation between low IQ and not making anything out of your life, which is understandable. It's just too difficult. But there is zero correlation between having a high IQ and success. There's literally zero. The point is,
I would also argue there's another, I mean, it's a bit off our subject, but we do get into some interesting debates here. I'm just thinking about, well, okay, let's look at somebody who is, as you know, a group of people who've traditionally been, you know, a group who are traditionally regarded as having learning difficulties, which are children who have Down syndrome, or people with Down syndrome. Yes. Now, when I was, you know, I'm very old, and when I was growing up, children with Down syndrome were put into mental institutions. They went into, or institutions for retarded people, and they lived their life out there, you know, and they were like, oh, all right, they were reasonably well cared for, whatever. And people worried if they had children with Down syndrome, they wondered who would look after them as they get older, and the parents age, and they're often born to older parents anyway. And there were all this sort of like this problematic thing. And then somebody came along and went, do you know what? Maybe actually people with Down syndrome can do more. Some groups of people held out more hope for those children with Down syndrome than anybody else had before. And they found that they could, with help and support, learn to read and write and do various things and function for themselves. Yes. And, you know, the idea that, you know, some had worse Down syndrome, some had better Down syndrome, that sort of disappeared as well. Now, I don't know about you, but we have organisations, I'm sure the Dutch do as well, where we have businesses and companies that are set up to provide employment and support. And they're not, you know, they are self-sustaining businesses. They're usually community interest companies. So we have a lovely organisation here called, Care in the Garden, not Care in the Community, Care in the Garden, and it's an organisation. It's like a garden centre basically that grow plants and, you know, pot on plants and whatever. And most of the people, in fact, all of the people who work there have some form of learning difficulty, and a lot of them have Down syndrome. And you, generally speaking, will not meet more happier, more willing to please, wanting to please, enjoying their work, getting satisfaction out of what they do, than this group of people. Now, isn't everybody, I'm not generalizing, I'm sure they have bad days and good days like the rest of us, but generally the motivation to provide pleasure to other people through plants is very, very high. And they don't sit there going like, well, what if I could become a banker? I might be happier. You know, they don't have those issues in the same way, because they've found something that's really fulfilling. It does all of these things. They know they can do it. It's worth doing. People like it. It's interesting and it's enjoyable. So they're highly motivated. So actually, you know, sometimes you know, we can actually, and that is all to do with other people's perception of that group of people. Why now they are successful members of society, whereas 30 years ago they were not. Right. And I think it's a really interesting, you know, sort of process that we when we go through, when we start believing more in people and looking for what they can do rather than what they can't do. Yeah.
So actually in the building where we have the training programs, you're coming in September for a mini NLP conference. Yeah. There is a, what we call them social workplace, where the people with a handicap can still work if they want to.
Yeah, but I'm just looking, you know, at what I see around me with, you know, friends who have children with Down syndrome and stuff. You know, the level of joy those people who are now adults and who's now surviving much later into life as well, bring to themselves and to their families is often higher than, you know, those so-called highly intelligent people. So
like
anyway,
me.
don't labor it, because I don't want people to accuse me of being generalizing about groups of people.
Jane has a remark or a question, but I don't understand anything of it.
No, I
What's
don't.
the difference between true north and magnetic north? Because personally, I keep what I believe to be true north. It's based on my already forward planning and is backed up as I go. But I question what is my true north. True north, for example.
I'm not sure I understand. I understand that you're using a metaphor between true north and magnetic north, but I'm not sure what you're asking us, Jane. I understand what you're saying is that sometimes you question what your truth, your deep truth on something, but I don't understand about the metaphor between magnetic north, really. You want to put it another way, maybe, and we'll have a look at it again. Shall we get so then we come on to what are the NLP strategies that we use to do all of these three things. We can lose that slide now because probably people are fed up of looking at it. That's better. Oh, there we go. When I pop up on it's funny, when I pop up on the other side, it doesn't look right anymore. You have to, it has to be a certain way now.
Yes, definitely. And you have to have the ABC NLP halo above your head.
Yes, that's right. I don't know what you should have that because it's your model, not mine. It looks like it's mine.
No, but I'm associating your head with it. So.
I know you are. I'm not sure that's a good thing.
It will motivate you to learn more about ABC NLP. It's very interesting.
Well, I know it is. Well, I learned quite a lot already. What else do you want me to learn? You want me to, I read everything you send me. You know, I'm here. I'm doing my stuff. You know, I'm very happy you're doing ABC NLP, but you know, I'm not asking you to do my teaching excellence stuff. Oh. You do yours, and I'll do mine. And if by chance we come together and all of that, so we can look at some of the patterns that we've already talked about, and add to them in order to make them more motivational. So we talked in another session about the more patterns before. So we can use the more pattern to create more motivation for that whole first thing about whether or not it's to do with what we think is worth it, whether it's we believe we can do it. So we can use it. You know, the faster we learn something, the easier it becomes, the more fun we can have. So we can tie them together. So you know, the more you learn NLP, the faster you'll learn the language patterns, which will enable you to quickly become more confident in your communications. So when we link them together, we can link those worth it, can do it, worth it, it's enjoyable and interesting, all together in a sentence, just using the more pattern. Right. So it makes it very easy to do when we use the Milton patterns. If it's important word when it comes to, or important word when it comes to motivation and propulsion. So when we say if you do your homework, then you can have a reward. Well, no, that's already allows for the possibility of failure. So we want to avoid if and use when, but also all the other time predicates. You know, so we can say, you know, before you get the answers correct, check. Mm-hmm. So that's right. A really way, rather than going like, you need to check your answers in case they're wrong, you go before you answer all of them correctly, check them. Right. So that we can turn those things around. So while you're doing this, you can enjoy learning it even more. So we can use those time predicates really helpfully. You know, when you continue reading this, you'll start to understand much more quickly what it is we're talking about today. When you do your homework, learning becomes easy. That's right. Yeah. So we use all, and of course, the more we mix them, the more we stack them, then the less resistance we get from the brain to that sequence, so that the person goes, oh yeah, we can do that. And in resistance, I would say it is less critical evaluation of what is being said. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's right. So they don't think about it as much. They don't think about it. It bypasses the thinking bit.
Well, actually, I think that when language becomes a bit too complex, then the first thing that goes out is the critical evaluation by the conscious mind of what is being processed at the unconscious level, at the level of language.
And what happens instead?
So if you stack presuppositions, for instance, it becomes very difficult to understand what's exactly being said. So the brain has to work harder to determine the context and the meaning of what you're saying, and actually that working harder means that it will spend less time critical evaluating what's being said.
Yeah, I agree with that. However, I also think that one of the things, again, that is the NLP nerd thing, is I also agree that people, when they start to stack presuppositions, they need to absolutely know where they're going. Because what I hear quite often is again, some NLP trainers stacking presuppositions in a way that it becomes nonsense.
Or
so you're sitting there and you go like, well, so what?
You know, what they try to achieve.
What is it that they're trying to achieve exactly? Other than turning my brain into like, I'm just not listening to this idiot anymore because it doesn't make any sense.
Second rank influence, because then you notice that something is being done. And you have to do it in such a way that the people you talk to or write to have no clue what you're doing.
That's right. Well, it's all, well, not that they have no clue what they're doing, but that it makes sense in some way. If they do stop and listen to it and they do follow it on, it makes perfect sense.
Exactly.
So it's, and then they can relax and let it do its stuff because they know that it's actually making sense in some way that is beneficial to them. That's what's important.
And how do you feel about NLP trainers using these standard way to, I would say, bullshit themselves out of the difficult situations? Because I think you can hear it. It's still, how you say, formulated correctly. So it's not that they're just stacking for the I say the purpose of stacking, but it's just that they go, well, this is like this and blah 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 blah. And trust the process, and then they will just ramble off a certain.
Yeah, there's two things that really annoy me when people say just trust the process, and the other one is they say, well, when somebody goes like, I don't understand this, none of this is making any sense to me. They say, oh well, we're teaching you unconsciously.
Yeah.
No, you're not. You're just actually we want to get to the unconscious. We want, but actually what we want is our conscious and our unconscious minds to line up in the same direction. And if my conscious mind thinks you're bullshitting, then whatever my unconscious mind thinks, my conscious mind will take it out and go like, I'm out of the door. I'm not sitting here listening to this rubbish. Yeah. So it's, and again, this comes back to having credibility. The trainer must have credibility and must know what they're doing, and people will rumble you if you don't. And that's what's good about it, because people just get rumbled, because they just, if they're, and I don't think I'm not talking just about NLP teachers. I'm talking about anybody who does something and pretends that they're good at it when they're not. And Joost, you're not drawing me into your NLP vendetta. With people of competence and know what they're doing. My partner Hugh is very funny. He always says that whatever you teach or whatever you're doing, like whatever course you're running, if you put something new together, you should always sell it as half price the first time you do it. Because you should be honest about it and say, look, this is the first time I'm doing this course, so I'd like to offer it to you for half price, and then I really value your feedback on it at the end, so that I can improve and make sure that the next time I run it, it really is worth the full value. I think that's a very good.
You can price it at full value, and if it's a success, then double your prices.
Yeah, well, that's what the NLP trainers that you criticize might do, Joost.
Definitely.
So what other patterns? Let's just wind up with a couple of other patterns. So the other things that we haven't talked about is cause and effect, and the other one that I always forget, complex equivalence. So we can use those as well to make sure that people are motivated to move in the right direction, keep going. So and it's also very useful for in that can do thing when people don't believe it. We can say You know, I know that you found equations really hard in the past, but that's okay, because it means that you like a challenge, you like to be challenged, and you'll push through and start to get there in the end. So, you know, we can use that, whatever somebody's experience is, to connect it to what they want, whether it means that, or it caused you to, because you didn't find it very easy to begin with, that's caused you to be very, very dogged and determined, so you get through to the end, which is very important in this subject. So we can link past experience to future success with those can do, worth it, it's enjoyable, and it's interesting.
Right.
So we can, you know, people who've done some NLP can look through all the different patterns and go, well, how can I use this pattern to answer those 4 questions? Can I do it? Is it worth it? Is it interesting? Is it enjoyable? And make sure that the person starts to feel those different emotions and feelings that they need to be able to keep motivated. And of course, one of the things that we need to say about motivation is it doesn't just start at the beginning. You don't do it at the beginning of a session and then forget about it. And then, you know, it's one of those things you have to keep coming back to, because people are making that minute by minute, second by second judgment of a cost benefit analysis. So the first 10 minutes, they're up there. Yeah, this is all good. And then it all gets a bit dull and I need a cup of tea, or maybe, you know, the sun's shining and I could be sitting outside. So we need something else to bring some more motivation back in, so that the more that they listen to you, the more fun it is, the more enjoyable they find it, and the more worthwhile the whole process is.
Exactly.
Yeah, there we are. So we haven't got to propulsion, but that just gives us another subject. That means that we have another subject for another day to look at propulsion. But unfortunately, It's not going to have to be next week.
Oh dear.
Because I have little people staying with me next week, and so I will have I would have little people coming in and out doing this all the time. I'm trying to talk to you.
Yes, no problem. We can skip next week.
So we're going to skip next week, I think.
Let's talk about learning preferences in 2 weeks.
Well, you don't want to do propulsion in 2 weeks.
No, I thought it would be too much of the same. But you want to do propulsion in 2 weeks, no problem.
I don't mind what we do.
We'll do propulsion, but I have to put it in the calendar, because otherwise...
No, put learning preferences in then.
Okay.
If you want to. That's why I get on my soapbox when we do learning preferences.
Exactly. So we're skipping the 16th.
Can we call it learning preferences versus strategies?
Yes.
I don't want people to think I'm going to talk about learning preferences at all, because I'm sort of not.
Yeah, that was the original title. I thought it was a bit long, but it's in the diary, and then we do the 30th. We will go back to propulsion systems.
Okay.
Good. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yours?
Questions? Huh?
Any questions?
No questions.
No
We're done for today. All right.
All right. Thank you, yours.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.